two stories here. A story about degenerate clergy, and a story about a bunch of lawyers turning child abuse into a cottage industry. Which story do you want us to write? Because we're writing one of them.
I'm not crazy. They control everything.
This is not just Boston. It's the whole country. It's the whole world.
They knew, and they let it happen. It could have been you. It could have been me. It could have been any of us.
Welcome to Editors on Editing. I'm Glenn Garland. Tom McArdle has edited such insightful films as The Station Agent, Win-Win, The Visitor, and In a World. Now he has brought his editing skills to the powerful masterpiece, Spotlight. Tom, thank you very much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
So you and I go back a long time. You know, we first met
2000.
each other.
Yeah.
2000?
At Echo Post, yeah, in Culver City.
Yeah. How did you get into editing in the first place?
In college, I started doing a little editing, and it was the part of the process I liked the most. I would just sit there at the editing machine, and this was VHS to VHS.
I did that too.
Just
Where you'd lose like 10 frames.
Right.
Your exact
Yeah.
edits would be like a minute,
Right.
a minute later or something like that.
And I just loved editing. I would sit in the edit room for hours and hours, and I wouldn't notice the clock. And then that was once I got out of school, everyone said, well, you have to specialize in something. And editing seemed like a natural choice. I went to Dartmouth, and I was a film minor. I was an English major, and the last year or two, I got involved with a lot of filmmaking courses, and then I actually got into the industry by looking up some Dartmouth alums that were working in the industry and contacting them, and they told me about the Shooting Gallery, which was an indie production house in New York.
And were you working there as an editor or an assistant, or how did you get?
Everything. I mean, I started off as an intern and a PA and craft services, and then I edited on some things, and then I got to cut some stuff.
And how did you and Tom McCarthy first start working together?
I got sent the script in 2002 for Station Agent, and I thought it was a great script, and we had a good meeting. We talked about films that had a similar tone, and one was Local Hero, that film with Burt
I love
Lancaster.
that film.
Yeah, and it did have a similar tone to his script for Station Agent, and we sort of bonded over both being fans of that film. And
There is like almost this theme that keeps continuing in you guys' collaborations, which is sort of like this underdog going up against the establishment type thing, and that was in Local Hero as well.
yeah,
How has your relationship evolved over time, you and Tom?
it's evolved in that we sort of like know our process more now. We know how we like to work. We always have a couple days of pickup shooting during the edit, and we also like to have regular screenings every 3 weeks or so. I like to do a screening for, say, 8 people in the edit room, and we learn a lot from that. We're generally looking for how people, if they're following things, if they're tracking information, if things are clear, if it's lagging anywhere. We'll also sit behind people and try to sort of gauge where people are locked in and where they're not. When you keep hearing the same feedback about something, like I had a problem with that, I had a problem with that. Like when there's the 9/11 sequence, for a while, people were complaining that we were away from the investigation for too long, and we heard that a lot for a bunch of screenings, and then we cut out a scene and a half near there, and then all of a sudden the problem disappeared.
So you had a lot of screenings, but did you guys have preview screenings as well?
We had one, in late April in Pasadena, and that's always the most stressful part of the job, right? That's probably the most stressful day that you have.
It probably is, yeah.
And that went pretty well. And after that, we cut for another month, and we cut out another few minutes, trimmed to 3 minutes.
And was some of that informed by the preview, or?
It was, yeah. You got some comments on different things, and also our own feelings about certain areas. And so, yeah, we cut out 2 or 3 minutes, I think, after that.
Well, it's a tricky film because there's a lot of dialogue scenes and a lot of talking heads.
Yeah.
And so that must have been sort of on both yours and Tom's minds, keeping people involved and keeping the scope and not keeping it claustrophobic. What were your discussions about all that?
Well, it was like a feel thing, and as we went along, we were cutting out pieces of scenes a lot, and we would often cut out a line or two in a scene to keep it tight. And it was just sort of like the film would evolve. Like most cuts, it evolves as you go along.
There's this great scene right up front where Marty comes in and has this conference with all the reporters, and he says, I want I want to go after the church.
The Boston priest molested kids in 6 different parishes over the last 30 years. The church found out about it and did nothing. This strikes me as an essential story to a local paper.
That scene was interesting because we sort of let Marty Barron have extra beats in places, so he felt like a little more of an outsider, like he was a little bit out of sync with everybody, and also that he wasn't afraid to take extra beats and like come out with his statements in a more measured way.
Yeah, everybody else is very snappy,
Yeah.
and he's got a different feel.
Yeah, with the others, I would often have them overlapping and so forth, and with Marty, I'd always give him an extra beat or two just to sort of set him apart.
When we end that first Marty scene, there's this exchange where Robbie says, well, Spotlight, we always pick our own things to go after, and then Marty says, would you consider picking this one? And then you cut hard, and I found a lot of the transitions in the film were like that, where it wasn't like, okay, and now
Right.
let's get the answer, or okay, let's walk out of the room. And
Yeah, I mean, some of those cuts were found in the edit just to sort of propel things and make it interesting. Like we call them sort of like energy cuts. If you can cut on an interesting idea and jump ahead, I find that it sort of energizes the film for people.
the first 20 minutes, you kept the pace really very quick. After the prelude, you accelerate the pace so that people were trying to catch up.
Right.
And it didn't seem like it took too much of a break until Mike takes his run and he stops in the office on the weekend.
Yeah, I think, like with most movies, one of the big struggles is always getting into the film, right? So we always end up trimming a lot out of the first, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And we were finding with our little test audiences that people started to get more involved with the film once we started having the survivors show up, the interviews with the different survivors. So the goal was to get to that part of the film as quickly as possible.
What was the challenge with making sure that all of the Spotlight reporters were featured enough? Because you've got these 4 characters, and you want to make sure that you give them enough screen time.
We did make an effort to sometimes give more reaction shots to Rachel McAdams, because sometimes she would get lost a little bit. And same thing with Brian Darcy James. And also Rachel's her reaction shots are always great. So
She was phenomenal in this.
Yeah. And she if you see her daily, she just every take she gives you great reaction shots. She's a really great listener as an actor. So
Tell me about actors and listening and how that affects you as an editor.
Well, the actors that give you good reaction shots are giving you a lot of gold, right, that you can use in the edit. And some actors are better at it than others. Some actors sort of just do their lines and then, wait for it. But these are all great actors, so they always gave me something good.
There's a great scene when Robbie almost attacks McLeish over at the elevators.
Right.
And then McLeish, there's this big power shift.
You're going to give me the names and the names of their victims. Are you threatening me?
In that scene, we had a lot of coverage, a lot of takes, and I liked the takes where, and Tom did too, where Keaton was more aggressive. It always felt like Keaton was being a hunter, ready to rip his neck out to get the truth. And then the script has this interesting thing where, no one is faultless, and the reporters have sort of missed the story at points in the past. And, I think that became an interesting subplot later in the film. But editorially, it just was like, great actors doing their thing and trying to just sort of assist them in sort of making it flow.
We need to focus on the institution, not the individual priests. Practice and policy. Show me the church manipulated the system so that these guys wouldn't have to face charges. Show me they put those same priests back into parishes time and time again. Show me this was systemic, that it came from the top down.
There's a nice montage where they decide that they're going to go after the system of abuse.
Yeah, I think we call that the summer montage, where everyone's knocking on the doors. And yeah, that was a big montage, and it took a while. We had a lot of footage, and it started out a bit longer. The Boston shoot was very sort of rushed almost. They were trying to get like 60 shots a day and running around. And
Because the acting in that whole sequence, there's so many different characters that they're talking to. And there's not one bad actor in the bunch.
Oh, great.
And
some were non-actors, that local people they found, and yes, that's cool that that it felt that way for you. Yeah.
Were there many lifts throughout the film?
Yeah, I mean, in the montages there would be little pieces we'd pull out. There were 5 full scenes we cut out.
Wow.
And then we had a lot of fragments of other scenes we cut out. Pieces of scenes like the porch scene with Mark Ruffalo and Rachel McAdams at night. We cut out about half of that scene just to sort of make it flow a little better.
Sure. How long was the first cut?
The first cut was, I think, 2:20.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had 2 shoots that happened during the edit where we added some scenes.
And where in the process did you guys decide, okay, these are the things that would be good to go out and shoot to elevate the movie?
In the middle of the edit, while we were doing those screenings every 3 weeks, we had lists of things that we might want to get. And it's sort of how we work on every movie. We always do at least a 2-day pickup shoot during the edit. And we always get stuff to go in between things, or little inserts, or just things to sort of like help the thing flow.
I love right after that where Mike starts talking about Law's involvement and how he's complicit. And he's reading this letter, and we're following just the taxi. And
Right.
We're not actually seeing his face. And then he runs into the Boston offices, and then we finally come up to him and he's reading, and we pull back. Tell me about cutting that whole sequence together.
Yeah, that was originally, that had a bunch of other shots in it. We had a lot of shots of the survivors and also a couple shots of the lawyers. And in one of our little screenings about midway through the edit, Brian Koppelman was there, who was a friend of ours, and he was editing next door to us. And he said, that feels like an end of movie montage, because you see all these people in it, and it feels like it's signaling the movie's ending. And so then we tried a version with none of the survivors or lawyers. We only kept one shot, shot that pans from the cab to the guy pushing his little child in the swing. And that child is Tom's daughter, Nora.
So you had to keep that one.
Right, yeah, that was the one that had to stay.
I love that scene between Robbie and Sullivan. There's so many awkward pauses, and
Yeah.
it feels so uncomfortable, and it feels like the movie's been building up to this confrontation.
Yeah, it was a great scene. And we cut off some stuff at the end of the scene. There was another bunch of shots that used to be at the end, and we just sort of decided to get out at the list.
Well, what was great is, for a long time, I did not think that he was going to get Sullivan to sign,
Right.
because it really felt like he was really pushing back, and you really held the tension really nicely there.
Oh, cool.
There's a wonderful little scene where Sasha is watching her Nana read the article about the priests. And it's simple, but it's so elegant in the way that it's constructed. Tell me a little bit about that scene.
Yeah, it just felt like we shouldn't cut too much back and forth. But it's also part of a larger intercut. That was something that happened during the edit, where we intercut with the printing presses and the trucks. We got all those printing press shots because we had a timeline issue that we were finding in our little rough cut screenings, because we had Nana seeing the paper and also Garabedian seeing it, and then we showed the papers getting loaded onto trucks and going out, and we were talking to the reporters, and they said there's no such thing as an early edition. So then we went and got all those printing press shots and did an intercut, so then the timing of it's sort of a montage now, so the timing doesn't really matter as much anymore. Every time we would go to get a shot would be just to sort of solve the problem that we'd been hearing about. So.
Mm-hmm. And what were your greatest challenges with this film overall?
2 things we always look at is sort of clarity and pacing. So we just sort of kept on that all throughout, tracking what information people were following, what they weren't, and also just trying to keep it moving,
And do you have some favorite scenes?
I always liked that one scene towards the end at the bar with Robbie and Pete Conley.
The guy, he might not be perfect, but we can't throw out all the good he's doing over a few bad apples. Now, I'm bringing this up to you because I know this is Barron's idea, his agenda. And I gotta tell you, honest to God, he doesn't care about the city the way we do. How could he?
This is how it happens, isn't it, Pete?
What's that?
Guy leans on a guy, and suddenly the whole town just looks the other way.
That actor, Paul Guilfoyle, I thought did a great job. That was like his first take. We used all the way through for that scene, and it was just great. You would always have, every scene we had these great actors showing up, and it was, everyone was fantastic. So.
Well, I love the film. I thought you did a fantastic job, and I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, thanks, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We need to focus on the institution. Show me that it came from the top down.
They'll try to silence anyone who speaks out.
You leave me alone, you hear me, goddammit?
6%. to act out sexually.
6% is 90.
90 priests.
If there were 90 of these bastards, people would know.
Maybe they do.